Through this Easter season, of course, we're listening to the Acts of the Apostles sequentially. Although there's a few little skips, and I always scratch my head because they skip some of the best parts. Of course, you have to try to cram it all in for masses. But I do encourage you to read the Acts of the Apostles. If you've never read it, it's just a great trajectory of the early days of the church. But yesterday's reading was Paul in Miletus. He had gathered with the presbyters of Ephesus, some miles away, but he had worked among them for 3 years in Ephesus and gave them sort of a last will and testimony encouragement. In fact, it's great, the presbyters, meaning priests, it's great stuff for priests to hear, and I'm going to be meditating on that a lot during my next week on retreat. We are a priest retreat. But then, now, today's reading, Paul's already in Rome and he's in trouble. Well, what happened in between? In between, the reason he left Ephesus and Miletus and was finishing up his third missionary journey was because he felt compelled to go to Jerusalem. It's not really clear why he's going to Jerusalem. And there are a number of premonitions all along this way between Miletus, which is in Turkey, so he's got to take ships down back to the down to Syria, the Middle East. So but each time he stops at a different community, they describe premonitions they have of the harm that's going to come to him in Jerusalem. He even tells them of dreams he has where he's going to get into hot water in Jerusalem. And why Jerusalem? Because remember, the Sanhedrin's there. He used to work for them to defeat the way, to fight this Jesus movement. So, and then now he's on the other side. So they still are mad at him. And they want to kill him if they get their hands on him. So what happens? He goes back to Jerusalem. He's greeted by everyone there, and things are going well for the first few days. But of course, he goes to the temple. They even suggest a few things that might be, help. Maybe if you went and did the purification stuff. He's being accused, of course, of violating the law of Moses by saying you don't have to be circumcised to become a Christian. So that's at least their claim, their main charge. So he gets back to Jerusalem, and eventually he's in the temple, and they recognize him, and a riot breaks out because he's defying this law of Moses, and they have a number of reasons to have it in for Paul, but a mob forms, and they just start wailing on him to kill him. They're just this crazy mob, and so that's where the commander, the Roman commander of half a legion, so he's really high up there, he sends his soldiers down to rescue Paul. And then it leads to an arrest where he actually is arrested for his own protection, but then they're going to interrogate him. And how do they interrogate him to find out what's going on? They're going to flog him. And as he's being stretched out to be flogged, he says, "Do you realize I'm a Roman citizen?" What? Because Roman citizens have rights. You can't just flog them without they don't care about the people of the land there. But the Romans, if somebody's a Roman citizen, you can't flog them. And there's this interesting exchange where the soldier is about to flog him, says, "Well, how did you become a Roman?" "I bought my citizenship." And Paul goes, "I was born into citizenship." Even more important. So now they're scared of him because he could bring charges against them as soldiers for violating the Roman laws. Anyway, Paul is using all this stuff to his advantage to get out of these sticky wickets. And now we see where he can tell God has a bigger plan here. So as he's brought before the Sanhedrin, and they are all united in their hatred to Paul, he goes, "Well, this isn't good. How am I going to get out of this?" And he just puts a little drop of controversy in there because he knows how divided they are on the issue of resurrection. And he, of course, drops that in there. "Well, I'm just here because I believe in the resurrection." And then the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who are on opposite opinions of that, they start fighting with each other. And then Paul gets out of that. But eventually, what the interesting last line of this that Jerry read for us is where Jesus, the following night, the Lord stood by St. Paul. He had a vision, an apparition, and said, "Take courage, for just as you have borne witness to my cause in Jerusalem, you must also bear witness in Rome." So how is Paul getting to Rome? The Lord leads him to Jerusalem, where he's arrested. He's going to appeal to Caesar. And then at the Roman Empire's dime, they're going to take him to Rome, where he'll be at the center of all the Gentile world. That's the plan. We are an answer to that plan. We're the Gentiles. We're in this faith because of these movements, these actions that the Lord took through his humble, docile servants who did his bidding, even though it didn't make sense. And notice how Jesus prays. Father in heaven, here he is at the Last Supper with his disciples. It's just a fledgling movement, right? I pray not only for these, but also for those who will believe because of their word. Everybody else throughout the history of time, beyond the borders of Israel, are the answer to this prayer. And Jesus refers to us and all of us as the Father's gift to Jesus. So we're here because of great courage and trust in God's plan. And what's our purpose? To have courage and trust in God's plan. No matter what the circumstances are that befall us, to remain faithful to the true one, as Jesus did and witnessed to us, and St. Paul showed by his life and eventual martyrdom.